Good morning. This is Adam Wise of Andor Technology, an Oxford Instruments company. And in this short video, I want to give you a quick overview of how to monitor exposure on an sCMOS camera, specifically here the Marana 4BV11. This is really helpful for setting up and troubleshooting all sorts of measurements and might give you some insight into what's going on inside the camera. The back panel of this camera is a little bit different than you might be used to if you're used to using our CCD cameras. Instead of discrete SMB ports for each signal, there's a D-sub connector, if you can see here, that connects to a breakout cable, not pictured, that carries the ARM, trigger, and auxiliary in-out signals. As a reminder, and I have the pinout here, the ARM signal, the ARM line, goes high when the camera is ready to take an exposure. The trigger input is for syncing the camera with an external signal, and the auxiliary I/O line is a general purpose line that can be used for granular exposure monitoring in a neat way, which I'll show you shortly. This is a small slice out of a larger high-speed spectroscopy demo that I'll be putting up shortly, so stay tuned for that. So right now, I have an LED being pulsed for short periods of time, 1 millisecond on and 1 millisecond off. When the LED is on, I have a separate 5-volt trigger channel that's going high. That's the red trace here. So actually, this is being driven by an Arduino Mega that's controlling the light source and also the trigger, and if there's any interest, I'd be happy to give a short tutorial video about how to do that. It's a really great way of getting a very cheap and flexible light source that can be used for all sorts of things that actually has a lot of utility. And it costs about $40 or so, maybe less if you buy a generic version. So again, here I have an LED being pulsed for short periods of time. And when the LED is on, I have that 5-volt trigger channel going high, which I can use to sync the camera. So right now I have that trigger line and the camera's auxiliary I/O line connected to my oscilloscope. So you can see the trigger signal in red, with a period of 2 divisions, or 1 millisecond for the on time, 1 millisecond for the off time. So if I take an exposure, or if I do a video here real time for real-time acquisition, you can see that I'll get a blue trace. Now what is that blue trace? That's the auxiliary in-out line, and I'll show you what that's configured for right now. So it's a very useful exposure monitoring tool. So if I go to hardware, auxiliary output configuration, I can choose what this does. So fire row 1 goes high when the first row is exposing, only the first row. Fire row N goes high when the last row is exposing, either the last row of the sensor or the last row of the ROI. It ignores everything else. Fire all is the logical AND of all of the rows exposing, so it shows you when the entire chip is photosensitive, and fire any shows you when any row is exposing, so it's the logical OR of all the rows exposing. So I'm going to keep it to fire row 1 for right now. I'm just going to give you a quick rundown of what those actual fire signals look like and what they're useful for. So right now I'm going to have it set to fire row 1. I'm taking a kinetic series using a bunch of different settings that aren't particularly relevant. I'd be happy to go into it later, but just taking a signal for now that can keep up with the frequency, with the frame rate of my light source. So I'm going to take a signal, and you can see right now my auxiliary out line is showing me when the first row is photosensitive, and it's giving me a pulse that's equal in time to the exposure time. So right now I have it set to about half a millisecond, well, just about half a millisecond. If I cancel that and I change the exposure time to something different, say 1 millisecond, then it will show me my first row is photosensitive for 1 millisecond. It's being driven by the external trigger, and it's showing me that my first row is photosensitive during the whole light output. However, if we were to change this to fire any to show when any part of the chip is photosensitive, and I run the same measurement, now I'm getting a much larger signal here from the auxiliary in out. So this shows that the chip as a whole, parts of it are being photosensitive from as soon as I get the trigger to long after the trigger is done, or well, long being relative here. This is a millisecond. And this is because of the rolling shutter function, or the rolling shutter readout. So chips, different rows of the chip are becoming photosensitive one after the other. Then after their exposure time is done, then they're clocked off and read out. So even though I have a nominal 1 millisecond exposure time, I have a total photosensitivity on the chip of longer. If I switch that to fire row N, that will show me when the last row is photosensitive. That will give me an idea of when the last row in the chip is actually going to be capturing data, capturing light. If I run that again. And you can see that's lagged relative to this. So this is something I need to keep in mind if I want to make sure that I'm capturing the data accurately and without any kind of distortion. And then again, I'll do fire all, and this will show me when when the entire chip is at the same time collecting data. So you can see that's only a small part at the very end of the light here. So just a quick window into some of the things that you can monitor using the auxiliary I/O line. If you have any questions, feel free to email me at a.wise@andor.com or visit the Andor website. Thanks and have a good rest of your day.